Hey guys, welcome back to another week of the Life's Worth Living podcast. I'm your host, John Gossett, and we want to thank our sponsors tonight, GTM Builders, for making this beautiful model home home of this podcast and allowing us to record here. So if you're thinking about building a new home, reach out to GTM Builders. You can visit them at gtmbuilders.com or one of their model homes here in Tooele County. Tonight's episode is brought to you by A. Warner Homes Real Estate. Interest rates are really low. If you're thinking about buying or selling, come on out and check out Tooele County. It's a great place to live. We love it here, and A. Warner Homes will take care of you. Their number is 801-867-5078. Also, we'd like to thank another sponsor of the podcast, Comfort Inn and Suites in Lake Point. If you're thinking about having family come visit and you don't want them in your house, put them in a hotel. We got a beautiful hotel out in Lake Point, the Comfort Inn and Suites, and you can reach out to them at 801-250-3600.
Great looking race car in the lobby too.
They got a good looking Porsche in the lobby that kind of goes in conjunction with the racetrack out here in Tooele County. So if you're coming out, you might as well check it all out while you're here. So, hey, we're super happy to have you back for another week. And I know you come each week and are excited to see the guests that we find. We've had some incredible people on the podcast. I'm so lucky to have them. And tonight, it's twice as special. We've got the Sloans, Chris and Berna Sloan, with us tonight. And we're going to kind of feature Berna's story tonight because she's an incredible lady in this community, does so much within our community. And she has got a story that you just need to hear. And I think it will give a lot of people hope. A lot of people will recognize that, your past doesn't define you, and that it doesn't matter where you come from, that you can succeed and become who you want to be. And again, you can break the chain. And so thanks you guys for coming.
Thanks for having us.
So, pressure's on.
Here we go.
The pressure's on. So, Berna, introduce yourself to all of us. There's a lot of people in Tooele County that listen to the podcast, but there's a lot of people outside even the state, and I think we're being heard in over 20 countries. So,
okay. So I'm Berna Sloan. I actually grew up out here in Tooele County. I've lived here and was born here and has been here my whole life. I have 6 kids, and I have 12 grandkids.
Nice.
And one of the most enjoyable things I do is, besides being a realtor, is I have what I call Grandma Day, and I get 7 of those grandkids every week, once a day. So usually Tuesday or Wednesday I'll get them, and it's one of my joys of my life, besides being married.
Good one.
Well, yeah, she better throw that in there, huh, Chris? So, I'm not saying it's a big deal, but have you ever driven into a town and you see the spotlights that fan the sky at night? That's how you know it's Grandma Day. She does it up big. I've seen blow up slides, inflatable stuff in the backyard. I mean, that's a cool deal. And I'll tell you what, every grandma in Tooele County is jealous of that, including my wife. So I think that's pretty special that you do that.
Thank you. I enjoy it.
So back up and tell us a little bit about you. Your story starts in Tooele County, and your story starts fairly young.
So I was raised by my grandparents. When I was about 6 months old, my grandparents told me that my real mom, showed up, and I had boogers all over my face that were dried and an extremely filled diaper, and they decided that she could not take care of me. I was her first child, and took me out of the car, and I stayed with them, and they raised me.
From 6 months old.
Mm-hmm.
And so how was that growing up with Grandma and Grandpa?
It was a little more difficult, because they were still what you would call old-fashioned, and, they were raised very old-fashioned. You worked on the farm, you didn't go to school, and so, they had a tougher life, and so I think it was harder on me because I didn't have younger parents to raise me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And how many siblings did you have?
I ended up, there's 6 of us, and I'm the oldest. And at one time or another, I've had all of my other siblings live with me. I ended up raising my second oldest one from when he was in high school, and I helped him to graduate. My oldest brother came to live with me after he graduated from school because he'd been raised from my grandparents since he was about 10 years old, and then she kicked him out. And so I've had a lot of kids in my life.
Yeah. And they should have been sending you some royalty checks as they became adults, right?
Right, exactly.
Letting you know how much they appreciate it. That's a tough role, as you're a kid and you're helping out siblings. That's a tough deal. So you're raised by grandma and grandpa, and it's not quite the same as being raised by mom and right. Not just an age difference, but I mean, there's a bond between a mother and a child. I would assume
that I have with my kids. At least I feel like I do.
Yeah.
But it was harder, and quite frankly, my grandma was a mean person, and I hate to say that, but she wasn't liked by a lot of people in our town, and so it was hard living in a small town when people didn't care for your grandma.
John, let me jump in and give you an example of how well liked she was in her town. When Berna was 5, she had appendicitis, and it was rupturing. At that time, the town she lived in, everybody was on a party line. And Grandma trying to get a doctor and ambulance to come take care of her grandchild with the appendicitis attack. The other end of the party line, they took the phone off the hook, stuck it in a bird cage, and left it.
Wow.
Even though she'd asked them, could she please get on the phone because she needed to call the doctor.
Wow.
So my appendix ended up bursting, and I almost died from it.
And that was at age 5? Mm-hmm. Wow. That is tough. And you started out with very little.
Mm-hmm. So for all intents and purposes, I guess you could say we were poor. I actually had clothes that came from the dump, that we would go to the dump and go through clothes and find clothes you liked and took them home and washed them and you wore them.
So you had a special pair of pants that you found at the dump.
I did. They were
Tell us that story.
baby blue bell bottoms, and they had silver studs on the pants, so they were kind of unique. And I was wearing them, and a girl said, "I just threw those pants away." And so it was quite embarrassing for all of your friends and all of the kids, because we were a very small town, to know that you were getting your clothes from the dump.
Yeah, that had to hurt. And yet, you do what you have to do. I mean, you do what you have to do to get by. And unfortunately, that's not uncommon because there's a lot of people that are in tight spots and doing what they have to do to get by and stuff. But that is... Your situation's unique in the fact that it was such a small town,
Right?
that everybody knew everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So you went to school in Stockton, and how was that?
It wasn't too bad. I mean, when I was in 6th grade, we only had 36 kids between kindergarten and 6th grade, so that's how small it was. So when we went to junior high, it was quite a
shocker.
But
To come to the big city of Tooele, huh?
yeah, exactly.
Wow. And so, is there anything from elementary school that was difficult in growing up?
So I was abused by 4 different men. 3 of those men were 2 were relatives, and these 3 all happened in elementary school.
Oh,
And one was the guy who came out to check your hearing. And he used to check your hearing in the basement of the school, and there was nobody else or nothing down there. And there happened to be a cot down there, and he used to calm me down. And I was too young to know what was going on, why this was happening, but I knew enough that when he said he couldn't call me anymore and I could come visit him at lunch, I never went to see him again.
yeah. That's tough.
And I never told anybody about it until I was much older.
Yeah. Well, I think that's common because you don't know, A, why it's happening, and it's a scary thing to tell. I would think, especially at that age, elementary school, you're young, and
I did finally tell my grandparents. I started having nightmares. And I was already older, already a mother, and I finally did tell them what had happened with. I didn't tell them about the guy in school, but I did tell them about my grandma's 2 nephews that did it to me.
And how did they take that?
They were upset that I didn't say anything to them when I was younger.
But they believed you.
They believed me, absolutely, yeah.
So that had to feel good, because that's a scary thing, wondering if anybody would.
Right. And at the time, I mean, I felt ashamed that it was something I was doing to cause this. Yeah. And so I didn't want to get in trouble.
Yeah. And at that age, you'd have a lot of feelings of that, am I going to be blamed for this? Did I do something to bring it on? And that's a scary deal. So that wasn't the only abuse you had. You had that sexual abuse, but you actually had some physical abuse as a child too.
Yeah. So my grandma she was very tough, and she used to hit me with the belt. I even would have to go pick a stick out so that I could be hit with the stick if I did something wrong. But some of it was like, I got a new bike, and I went to go show off to my friends in town. I got something new, and I was letting them ride my bike when she came and seen that, and that was one of the times I had to pick out a stick to get hit with, because I'd let my friends ride my bike.
And she had bought the bike for you?
Yeah.
Grandma had. That's tough. And, as a child, you just kind of have to roll with the punches, so to speak. You have to, you have no idea what you get. Did you feel like it was normal, or did you feel like it was excessive?
I remember thinking it was excessive, but I also remember not willing to say anything, because I know one time she pinched me really hard and I had a really bad bruise on my arm, and I had a teacher ask me how that happened, and I lied and said I'd fallen or something, because I didn't want my grandma to get in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you recognized it wasn't maybe what the other kids were experiencing.
Exactly.
And there's not much you can do to change that. And how often did you see your real mom?
I seen her occasionally. She came out. Her and my grandma never got along great, so she didn't like coming out to my grandma's, but maybe once or twice a month. I only ever met my real dad once, and that was when I was already 18.
Gotcha. So he wasn't a part of
my life at all.
Your life at all. Mm-hmm. And so you'd see mom, and when she'd show up, did she try to step into that mom role, or was it different?
No, actually, we were more like sisters.
Gotcha. She wanted to come out and be a friend. And,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how old was she when you were born?
She was 20.
20. So she was still fairly young.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And in Utah, you can have that spread with sisters 20 years.
True. Huh?
I come from Utah County. So elementary school, you breeze through those things. And, I mean, you make your way into junior high, and you come into the big city for junior high. And tell me how that affected you. Was that... Was it difficult?
Hard. I didn't feel like there was a place I belonged. I wasn't LDS. I wasn't Catholic. I lived in a predominant LDS town. I wasn't, I wasn't with the A students. I wasn't with the Cowboys or the Hispanics at the time. I didn't have a place. I felt like there was no one place I belonged or a group I belonged to. The friends that I did have in Stockton all went off and made new friends, and I felt alone.
And that's tough. Junior high, I think, is tough for everybody when they move in. It's just an awkward space to be in those few years. But so you just didn't feel. You kind of felt like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Mm-hmm. And so, how did that affect you? I mean,
so I did finally decide that I don't know if the right words is deserve to live or if I should live. And I felt like I couldn't make my grandma happy, and there was no place I felt I lived, so I took pills and I tried to commit suicide. That was my first time.
And how old were you?
I was in junior high, so 7th or 8th grade.
7th or 8th grade.
I think it was 7th.
And you'd hit that low point where you just felt like you couldn't go on. Mm-hmm. And so, I think a lot of times you'll hear people say, "Oh, they're just doing it for attention." That wasn't the case. It was you just didn't want to go on.
No, and I never really told anybody. I mean, I just went through the school day with a huge ringing in my ears, and I just slept it off that night. I went home, I'd sleep, and I woke up the next day.
And so nobody ever knew. Mm-mm. When did you ever tell anybody?
Not till I was much older.
Gotcha.
Probably you.
And so the next day, you're still here, and what do? You just
get up and go to school.
Get back to life.
Yeah, and get back to life. And I'm like, I'm still here, so I might as well keep going.
There you go. So did things change, or eventually in junior high, or did you always feel kind of like the misfit?
I still felt like the misfit. I still felt like I never had my place, even through high school. But then I got pregnant at 16. And my grandma kicked me out, and so I was forced to go live with my real mom, and she taught me how you live on welfare and how you can game the system, and I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to be my mom, and I wanted something more. So I got married at 16. I stayed in high school. And I graduated with my class. I got to walk down the aisle, and it was a very proud moment for me to be able to do that and accomplish that, even though nobody said I could. I was a mom, I was a wife, I had 2 jobs, and I was still trying to finish high school.
And so how old was your husband? Was he still in high school as well?
No, he's 3 years older than me.
Okay, so he had...
Or 4 years older than me, sorry.
He had graduated and...
Well, he didn't graduate, but he did.
But you were still going to school. Hey, and I think that's amazing. That says a lot about your character, because I think at that point in time, being that young and having those changes coming into your life, it'd be easy to step away and just say, I'm not going to
finish.
Go back. And
I thought about that.
And I think for some, maybe it might even be embarrassing to go and be pregnant and have to... I've never been there, but I can imagine that it would be, a little bit afraid to see what people would say about you. And
actually, for me, it wasn't that. I don't know why that didn't bother me. For me, I felt like somebody finally loved me and wanted me.
Absolutely. I can see that. I meant at school, what the other kids in school.
Right, but it didn't bother me.
But to you, it was finally you found another puzzle piece you fit with, and there was that person for you. Mm-hmm. I get it. And so you have a baby. And back me up. Where did your mother live? You moved from
And
grandma's.
Twilla, Stockton to Twilla.
Okay, so now you're living in the big city.
Yes, I am.
And going to Twilla High School, and so you have a baby. And how did that change? Did that change? Because I'm assuming when you were younger, maybe some of those things like being taken from your mother and living with your grandparents and all of those things could lead a person to feel like they didn't have that place in the world where they belonged. Do you think that kind of
Absolutely
led to those feelings?
I felt like I needed somebody to love me and want me, and that's where I found it.
And I think we're all, as human beings, we want to connect with people and we want to feel loved and accepted and somebody to recognize that you're special, right?
Right.
That's all of us. And so you find the person that feels that for you and you raise a family. And so you've got one kid, you've graduated from high school. And then what happens? Anything?
As far as what?
Where does life lead you? You've got a baby. You're married.
So I'm married, and I end up having 4 more kids. I get to my 30s, and I start having a rough patch with my oldest daughter, and I didn't have the best marriage. I was actually physically and mentally abused in my marriage, and I felt like the one thing I wanted to be was I wanted to be a good mom, and I wasn't being a good mom, or at least that's the way I felt. I felt like I wasn't being a good wife because I couldn't make my husband happy, and I made my second attempt at suicide, and I took pills again. And in this one case, it was my mom who came down, and my real mom who sat with me and took care of me and made sure I was going to be all right. She was the only one that knew I had taken pills, and actually she made me go for a walk, and she made me get in the shower, and she helped me through that one. And again, I woke up the next day, and I'm still here.
Well, so you said you didn't feel like a good mom, but from everything I'm hearing from you, you didn't have that example to go off of. Mm-hmm. And as you were raising your kids, it would appear to me that you were trying your best to be a good mom.
I tried my best. And yeah, I'd go back and change a few things, but I still, my kids are
who
good.
Wouldn't?
Yeah, okay.
You know what I mean?
My kids are good kids now. They're all out there, and they all have great jobs, and and they have kids of their own.
They're great parents in their own right.
Yeah, and they're great parents. They're all great parents.
Well, and they had to have picked that up a little bit from you. I mean,
I hope so.
I was gonna say we're gonna give you a shout out. They're not here. We're gonna give you a shout out. So that's tough. Did you find that was hard though, to kind of be a mom where you didn't have that connection necessarily with your mother as a small child?
Yeah, it was hard in certain aspects because I didn't have what I felt like was a good role model, and I was trying my best to be what I thought other moms were, or what I thought a mom should be or should do, or I tried to make sure my kids always had good clothes, and they always got school clothes, always got new school clothes. That was a must. And
you didn't want them to go through what you went through, and so you wanted to give them a better life than you had.
Yes.
Well, I think that sounds like a good mom to me.
Thank you.
And so you've got 4 kids, correct? 4 kids?
5.
5 kids. Mm-hmm. 5 kids you're raising, and your marriage is a little bit rough. And so kind of how did that play out?
So I did end up leaving my husband. And so I've been in real estate for 28 years now. But at the time, I had not been working in real estate. I had my license, but I wasn't actually doing any work. I was helping my husband with his shop. And when I finally got brave enough to leave, that was hard. I didn't want to be my mom, and so I stayed in a bad relationship for 20 years because I didn't want to be what my mom was. 6 kids, 5 different fathers, and on welfare most of her life, and I just didn't want that. But there came a day where I was actually chased with a gun, and that had to be it.
And
I
how
had
old
already.
were the kids at this time?
So one's already 20, and one's 17, and 14, 11,
6.
and 6.
Okay.
And so I moved out. I moved out previous to this incident, but there had been many more. And when I moved out, I had nothing. I had a car. I had my kids. I had some clothes that would fit in a little Honda Accord, and a laptop, and that was it. And I had to start my career all over, so I went and got a job as a waitress at La Frontera. That was when La Frontera was really liked out here, and I started over. I ended up losing my car. My laptop ended up getting burned up, and so the one thing I did have was I did have a house to go to. I did go live in my grandparents' house because she was no longer there. She was in an assisted living home.
Where was Grandpa?
Grandpa had taken his life. He committed suicide. He shot himself in 2000. So how old would I have been? 34? Yeah.
And so do we know what led to that?
I don't know. I have a couple of different theories. I know him and my grandma fought on and off a lot. I also know that he thought that he had gotten a car accident and he was coming that next day to visit with me because I was going to help him finish out some paperwork for this accident, and he thought for sure that they were going to take all his money. And so I don't know if that was it.
I remember your grandma had a stroke at that point, had she not?
Yeah, and so he was her caregiver,
Gotcha.
and had to do everything for her. And he talked to me the night before, and he gave no indication at all. He said, are we meeting tomorrow still? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay. And he said, I love you, mijita. And the next thing I know, I'm getting a call that he'd shot himself. And then I became Grandma's caregiver after that.
And she's in a home at that point in time?
She was at home at that point.
She was home at that point.
Oh, she was home?
Yeah, at that point. She didn't get... When she was in the assisted living is when I moved into her house, when I finally left my husband.
Wow. And so you've had... and that takes me back to you were in a marriage that had some rough patches, but maybe that had looked a little familiar to you from Grandma and Grandpa.
Yeah.
That sort of lifestyle. So, I mean, did that take a minute to realize that maybe this isn't how a marriage is supposed to be because you grew up seeing it? How did that...
Well, yeah, you could consider I was with him for 20 years, so It took a long time. It took a long time for me to finally feel that I deserved a better life, and that my kids deserved to see something better for a husband and wife. And that was hard. It was really hard to start over. And I started over with nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, I had nothing. I had no money, no child support. I had nothing.
So that was kind of your rock bottom. Mm-hmm. And it's everything that you have today, you built.
Mm-hmm. And I have a great life now. I have a great career. My husband and I do real estate together, so we get to be together 24/7.
So if you're not using A. Warner Homes, free plug for Ace.
Exactly.
We love you, Ace.
It's, I was going to say, we're all friends here. But,
Assanette's one of our favorite people.
Yeah.
but you guys own Group 1 real estate.
So my husband's dad started this company in the late 1970s, and then we decided to start doing it together. So,
That's amazing.
anyways,
So back us up to 34. Grandpa takes his life. You move back into the house, and you're working at La Frontera. You're doing real estate at the same time?
yeah,
Trying to build that back up to have that be your full-time gig. Mm-hmm. And so how old were you when you met this guy right here?
We don't really know. I'm deadly serious. We don't know. We both were in real estate at the time here in Twilla.
So is that how you met, was through real estate?
We don't know. We have daughters that are within a month of the same age, so they were always in dance together here
gotcha.
locally. They played on the same softball teams together here locally. So we don't know where within all of that
that
we actually met. We
for
don't-
the first time.
We don't
Yeah, yeah.
remember.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and we kind of laugh about it, but we really don't.
But we knew each other quite a few years before anything romantic happened. So
Sure.
we were, so our daughters ended up on the same accelerated softball team. So we traveled every weekend to go to softball.
Watching the girls.
Yeah. So, and he was actually the coach, one of the coaches.
I was the emotional support animal of the coaching staff. 13 preteen and teenage girls. There was a lot of crying. There is crying in softball.
Yes, there is.
And my job was to, after the real coaches that knew what they were doing got done talking to him, I would interpret it in a way that would theoretically not make him cry quite so much. So
He softened the blow, huh?
I tried to explain to them in terms they would understand what he was trying to get across.
Gotcha. Yeah, sometimes the coaches don't know how to.
Coaching boys and coaching girls are two very, very different applications. Let's
they
put
are.
it that way.
And the toughest thing about coaching is not upsetting the parents. I mean, that's a tough one.
That's the truth.
So you guys meet. So, okay, we'll back up. And Chris, I'm asking Berna this, not you. But, so who was attracted first?
Let's just say he made the first move. How's that?
There you go. Okay. So, and you guys have been together for how long now? Married for how long?
We've been married since 05, together since 03.
Nice. And so,
O2.
02.
And Votu.
well, congratulations. And if we back up, part of this story that we wanted to tell. We did an interview. I think it's like the 8th episode with my wife where we talked about adverse childhood experiences and kind of how those things kind of come into play. And you don't realize the effects of those experiences on children, how they affect you as an adult. And so unfortunately, when you talk about adverse childhood experiences, I mean, you can Google it and look this up, but I mean, they've been using this in schools since the 80s, talking about this adverse childhood experience test. It's 10 questions that you ask. But I think one of the things that drew me to want to have you come and talk about your story, because I knew little bits and pieces, but I didn't know the whole story, was unfortunately when people go through the things that you've gone through, so many times they don't make a change. That life continues all the way through there.
Going.
Yeah, and it keeps continuing. And yours is just a huge success story to me because your lifestyle right now, as we sit here, was completely different from the way you were raised. Mm-hmm. The things that you went through could have been devastating, and they could have held you kind of bound in that lifestyle forever. And so, what do you attribute to your making that big of a move?
Oh. I know I always wanted a better life for me and for my kids. And I definitely wanted to show them what a marriage should be like, which I feel like I was a success at that. But I think what I really want everyone to know is you can have so many different things in your past. You can have, sexual abuse, domestic abuse. You can start out poor. And you can still make your life a success if that's what you choose to do. We've had a huge thing lately about me being Hispanic and everything that's, help me, what's it called now?
Well, everybody's a subject of racism anymore, and she was not aware that, and still is not aware that she was ever that her race had anything to do with her. She never felt like she had been discriminated against. I won't say she's still amazed when people come with other stories, because obviously people do have issues. She didn't have time to be discriminated against. She didn't have time to feel oppressed. She was too busy
Trying to make it.
Yeah, and I think that's this is going to be one of those cases where I actually use less words than she does. But she decided where she was going to go and what she needed to do. And from a pretty young age, it was get through this day and get to the next day. And when that's your existence, she didn't make excuses. There weren't any excuses, because she didn't have time for excuses. I've got kids to feed. I've got a family to raise. I've got to do this and this and this and this. I've got to graduate from high school because I need to graduate from high school. I need to be better. I don't know if subconsciously she was trying to be better than what she'd come from at that point. I don't think she could have put that into words. But her whole life has been striving to get to that next level, whatever it is. She didn't have time to be discriminated against, and if she did, she didn't notice.
And that's a pretty unique story, especially in today, because we're seeing so many people that feel.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that you can take that to any level that you want. I went to the same high school that my cousin went to. We were in the same grade, and I remember my grandma talking to her sister, which had been his mom, and talking about how bad the teachers were treating him because he was Hispanic. And I'm like, I never feel that. I didn't, and maybe it happened, but I just didn't let any of that affect me. I didn't let any of those things determine where I was going to go in my life and in my career. I recently had a cousin that I grew up with out in Stockton, and she reminded me of a couple of things that happened, actually being called spics. And when we were in elementary school, I didn't even remember those times. Her bringing it up, I went, oh yeah, I do remember that now. But I just never let that stop me from achieving my goals. And I think that's the one thing I really want everybody to understand, is that you can be who you want to be if you choose to do it. And yeah, there's going to be obstacles, and you can dwell on what's happened to you in the past. But if you keep looking backwards, you can't go forward. And my focus was going forward. And I wanted to give my kids a good life, and show them a good life. And I think I succeeded, despite all the obstacles I had, all the different abuses I had. Starting over at 36 years old, starting my career all over again, having nothing. I was a waitress at La Frontera.
Yeah. Well, and I'll put that into terms that Chris will appreciate. Chris is a big car guy, if you don't know. So when you're sitting in the driver's seat, your windshield's this big, right? That rear view mirror is only this big. And that's because we need to spend more time looking forward than looking backwards.
Exactly.
And I think that's a lot of your story is. You just took it day by day. There was probably no 5-10 year plan, but you just knew that you wanted better than you had. And you wanted your kids to have better than you had. Was there somebody that you looked at as a child and thought, boy, that's who I want to be? I mean, did you have a role model that you kind of...
I never really had a role model, but I did watch a lot of TV. I watched a lot of Brady Bunch and lots of...
Didn't we all?
Yeah. The Waltons, I always thought the Waltons were pretty cool.
Yeah.
They just had a good family, and everybody loved each other, and they didn't have the alcoholism, and they didn't have the physical abuse, and I remember my grandma and grandpa getting into a physical fight after drinking coming from a wedding dance, and I had to call my uncles to come get my grandpa off of my grandma, and it all evolved around drinking. And so I knew I wanted something better than that, and I knew that if I was going to get that, then I was going to have to do something to get there.
So when you watched the Brady Bunch and the Waltons, I mean, did that feel like it was like it could be a reality, or did it feel like it was just so far-fetched from what you saw?
It was definitely far from what I saw, but it definitely made me want to be more like that.
So you felt it was attainable watching
Yeah.
it on TV, like I could have this someday.
Exactly.
So what was your biggest struggle trying to get where you are today?
Believing in myself. Believing that this small town girl from Stockton who was Hispanic and grew up poor could become a successful realtor. I've been Realtor of the Year for 4 years, 5 years, and we have our own company, and we do pretty well. I get to see my kids 4 or 5 times a week, where I see my real mom once or twice a month. I see my grandkids every single week, and I just
Get to work with me every single day.
So there is a downside.
Yes. Everything's give and take.
everything's give and take. But I really want people to know it doesn't matter where you come from, what background you have, whether you had a good life or a bad life. You can say, I want something better.
Absolutely. And that goes for anybody, because I think we always tend, maybe it's just me, but I think we tend to look at other people and say, why do they have it so easy? And I have this so hard. And especially with social media, because people only show you the good things and not the bad things. And so I think that's a tough deal, creating our own reality of,
And I've seen that. I've seen where people will compare their marriage to our marriage. Okay, yeah, our marriage is good. But everything isn't, you're right. What you put on social media is just the good stuff.
Or just the bad stuff.
Yeah.
The everyday life is somewhere in here. The 80% is in here and nobody talks about it because it's boring. It's just humdrum. It's every day. But the extremes, the extreme good, the extreme bad, that's what makes it on social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think that affects us? Do you think that affects like your kids, my kids today, the ones that are growing up watching that? We didn't grow up watching it. So, do you think it's going to affect them? What do you think social media is going to come to play?
I think that there will be kids that struggle. I think if they are kids that struggle, I think again they're looking at just the good stuff that people put on or their peers put on, but there's also bullying. We didn't have to deal with the bullying at the level these kids do these days. I mean, we had real bully people, you know.
Well, real is an operative term. It was, when I was bullied, they'd punch me in the head and then leave me and go do something else. Now, they can do it 24/7 with the click of a button. It's really easy and very little physical danger of the kid you just hit in the head is not going to turn around and hit you back. Keyboard warriors are amazingly brave.
And they're all 10 feet tall and bulletproof when they're doing it because they're somewhere else. And a lot of times it's done where you don't know who they are. So, you know, and there's so many things that are right in the world, and then there's those things where you kind of go,